So people in Israel who are opposed to what Israel's doing in Gaza are calling it Israel's Vietnam and saying that that's, the sign of hopelessness and waste and shame and lots of different things. It's worse than Vietnam when you think about it. It's maybe one of the worst wars ever conducted. Like, if we're being realistic and objective about it, is it the worst war ever conducted? And the fact that we don't have a lot of evidence of it, but we eventually will have a lot of evidence of how bad it is. And that evidence is part of the modern end of war. I mean, we can't have war when people can see exactly what war is, and we always produce the evidence, which is why they are not allowing journalists in. So they're not producing that evidence. But it should be. I mean, Syria should have been the final war. Was saying that all along. But we should make war obsolete at some point. And the fact that America is supporting the invaders in Gaza and opposing the invaders in Ukraine shows how arbitrary that is, or how there's not a lot of like moral righteousness in choosing. There's moral righteousness in choosing the Ukraine side of the war, but there's no moral righteousness in choosing the Israeli side of the war. So it's kind of like shows how arbitrary that is and how contradictory it is, or how much of an agenda it is, and how war is somehow a tool of these things, but war is also the program. War is also the game itself until we change the game and remove that tool. So we need to be able to think that way, and we need to oppose the war in ways that ends all war. But it's ironic that they call it Israel's Vietnam, and yet in a recent NPR report where they were talking about a protest to the Vietnam War included in like a concert or something from the 60s, they were saying that they also were calling out, police brutality and other injustices, social injustices, canceling of aid programs and all these things. And they're saying all these things had resonance in modern times except the anti-war protest. It's like, no, the anti-war protest is here too. And people who are trying to dismiss that or act like that's not what it is, that just because it's Israel's Vietnam doesn't mean it's not America's second Vietnam, or America's the one supporting Israel. So it's America, it's us too, doing this. And as I said before, I'm pretty sure it's way worse than Vietnam. I don't know. Just let me know. Which one do you think is worse, Israel or Vietnam? Maybe I'll just re-record a very simple statement and ask you that. Which one's worse, Israel or Vietnam? Israel and Gaza, or America and Vietnam? Maybe that'll bring the point up. But they call it Vietnam, and it's our Vietnam again, even though calling something Vietnam, calling something referring to, nothing against Vietnam, but referring to America's war in Vietnam, is the sign of shame, is a sign of that's why you don't do this. Don't go there. Cautionary example. Can we learn something? And speaking of which, can we make an example of America and Russia for we didn't make an example enough of Germany by splitting it in two after World War II. So we need to make more of an example of America and Russia. Split them into three, split America into two, and split Russia into three. I've been saying this for a while, but now it seems to make a lot more sense. Go ahead and ask Canada and Mexico, annex half of USA each. We've shown we can't be trusted with a country anymore. Facilitate land back to the indigenous people. But the intermediate state should be annex half of us each, please. Just like we could split Russia into a third for Ukraine, a third for China, and a third for Turkey. Interested? Like, we need to set an example and maybe not let them reunite again, is the point. Maybe facilitate creating new countries or giving the land back to the indigenous people like we did here, but don't let them become Russia ever again. So Putin did all this stuff to America and everybody else because he was upset about what happened to USSR. Well, look what might happen to Russia is you might never be even Russia again. And that's maybe what you deserve for letting somebody like that dictate all this stuff around the world through Trump, through Netanyahu, through Musk, through all his other cronies, all the Trump-Putineers. They all need to be stopped, and Putin needs to be stopped. And it doesn't take a war to do that. A cardboard drone could do it, but it doesn't take a war to do that. War is obsolete. We might as well go ahead and finish that war if we were going to, or Biden should have, or whatever, should have won for Ukraine. But we should also win with the plan of deporting Trump-Putineers to Siberia, or whatever Ukraine renames it. We should be serious about this, that they don't get to have a country after trying so hard to destroy our country and succeeding so much at destroying the people of Gaza. You don't get to have a country after doing that. That's the way that can go. You get at least split in half like they did to Germany, or you get facilitated the land back to the people that used to be there.